I'm gonna highlight right now. All right. I don't know what is wrong with all the military leaders I have seen up to this point, but almost every single one, when they go to a ceremony of any kind, and I've made a promise to myself now, whenever I get promoted, whenever if I ever take command, my number one supporter, my wife. She's the number one person I will shout out every time because I've seen it so many times, and it just makes me sad to see how many people either forget about their spouse or put them last.
I mean, but I think that's the mark of success. My hero is my father, and he did 28 years. I think the best picture of success that I saw was at his retirement ceremony. His entire family was on the front row
Oh yeah.
with him at the end. That is the mark of success, because there are a lot of leaders that make it to the end and accomplish great things. And I mean, their resume is decked out, but they lost their families in the
Yep.
process. I want to be great in what I'm doing and what I'm investing my time in, but I don't want to lose my family in the midst of all of that. I want them to be at the end with me. Welcome to the Branch series. I'm your host, Christopher Hill. I started this series to help cadets and other aspiring Army officers choose their job, aka their Army branch. In this series, we will converse with other company grade officers from various Army branches. They will share insights, personal experiences, successes, failures, their daily duties, and so much more. Welcome in, leaders. Today's episode, I'm talking to First Lieutenant Cameron Horn, great friend of mine, a fellow LU classmate. I love being able to come on here and chat with some of my old classmates to see where they are and just talk about their progression and where they're going. First Lieutenant Horn is inspirational leader, and every time I get to talk to him, I just feel better for it. When we were both cadets, we came on and we spoke about air assault school for cadets, and it was a great conversation. So if you haven't checked that out, take time after this episode and watch that. Maybe it's useful or helpful to you or someone else. First Lieutenant Cameron Horn is an armor officer. I'm excited to kind of deep dive into this branch and what day-to-day life looks like for an armor officer. So without further ado, help me welcome First Lieutenant Cameron Horn. Welcome back. I remember when we were cadets, we came on and we talked about air assault school.
I feel like time flies.
Let's get right into it. What drew you to Armor Branch? Can you describe your journey becoming an armor officer and what drew you to this branch?
Yeah, so for armor specifically, before I went to college, like right as I was getting into freshman year, I enlisted with the National Guard, got into the infantry world a little bit, and after some time with that, I got some experience with heavy weapons and just some of that kind of stuff. And I knew that with the tanks and with armor, it would be a lot more involved rather than being light infantry. So that kind of caught a little bit of my eye, and then I'm not gonna lie, some of the mentors I had while we were at Liberty University and ROTC, they kind of helped guide me, I guess, on the path that I started. Um, one of my mentors, Hunter Goodson, he's a captain now, but he kind of guided me and showed me and was showing me kind of like what armor means and what a lot of the armor guys do, and so that kind of inspired me to go follow that direction. And I figured, combat arms has always been something that's interested me. And since I already had a little bit of a feel of the infantry side, I was like, oh, let me go check out the armor side. Um, and I mean, it's tanks. Who doesn't like to be in and around tanks? That's just my personal opinion. So,
Three-part question. Where's Armor BOLC? How long is it? And how rigorous was it?
yeah, so Armor Bullock is at now Fort Moore, previously Fort Benning. Most people still call it Fort Benning, but it's there in Georgia, and Columbus is a pretty good area. Some people don't like it, but it all depends on like where you grew up and if you actually go out and get to know the area. But it's in Columbus, Georgia, at Fort Moore. It's roughly Bullock itself is roughly 4 to 5 months. It depends on what else you do there, because if you're going to a light unit or focused on like the scout side of the world, they might send you to airborne or some of the scouts courses that they have there at Benning. But Most of the time, Armor Bullock itself is just going to be 4 to 5 months. Not too rigorous. It's similar to any Army training you've had. If you can get through ROTC, you can get through Armor Bullock. It's the only thing that I would say is like rigorous is, I mean, you're going to do a 12-mile ruck. That's typical. You're going to do PT tests. That's typical. You're going to have field time where you're up late. But other than that, it's nothing that you've never done before. You know.
Does Ranger School play into your timeline or your progression, your path as an armor officer at all?
So things have changed a little bit. Armor doesn't, you don't have to have a tab. You don't have to go to Ranger School necessarily. I highly advise going. I attempted myself. It didn't work out. That's totally fine. That happens to a lot of people. But, if you've got a chance to swing at it, swing for the fences is what I tell people. But when it comes to going to Armor Bullock itself, a lot of the time when it comes to Ranger slots and stuff like that, they'll look at people who come out to go do you're gonna do like the Ranger PT test. They'll see like the initial pool of people that they have, and then they'll base off of how physically fit certain people are. If you've passed a certain number of RPAs, and then once you um, either pass them or you've shown interest enough, then they'll like include you in the platoon or the group that's trying to go to Ranger School. Right? People still go. It's just you really do have to work towards it. My current BC, he doesn't have a Ranger tab, and he's progressed all the way up to Lieutenant Colonel. There are out of all the armor officers we have here, there's two of them that I know that have a Ranger tab, and they're captains. They went through Ranger School when they were captains, and so it's not like as a lieutenant, it's not really a thing that's like gonna make or break you per se. It's definitely something that's cool to have and good to have. Definitely a great opportunity to take though. Absolutely.
So in general, do you feel that ROTC BOLC prepared you for your first assignment?
I'll start off by just blatantly saying no. ROTC helped with some stuff. It helped me understand, some of the relationship side of things. But when it comes to actually like getting to my first duty station, trying to figure out what was going on, things were definitely a little bit different. I mean, you just have to get used to it and kind of go with the role. But Bullock helped with some stuff with armor for sure. It helped me understand some of the basics. But I'll tell you straight up, if you go into either a platoon or your first unit as an armor officer expecting that you know everything, you're immediately gonna get woken up. So, I learned some stuff for sure. I mean, going through op words, learning some of that in ROTC, learning it in BOLC definitely helped. Some of the leadership skills for sure helped. Keeping physical fitness as like a forefront also definitely helped. But something that comes to light once you get to your unit is you realize that all that kind of stuff is just like a prep, and it's really just um, going through steps to like yes better you, but build like a foundation. But at the end of the day, when you get to your unit, you're going to learn all their SOPs. You're going to learn all of the ways they want things done. Because in BOLC, for example, Armor BOLC, when you go to do your op words, it's going to be absolutely insane. They're going to have a whole list of things that they want you to brief, and it's going to be like a checklist, almost like you're getting graded back in high school or college. And it will be, did you hit this? Did you hit this? Did you brief this thing? And they give you a time allotments, right? They'll tell you, oh, you have 50 minutes or 2 hours or 1 hour to brief whatever scale of a operation you're briefing, right? But then you're going to get to your unit, and then you're going to get to your platoon, and things are going to be totally different because, for example, ROTC, BOLC, you have a bunch of people who are future officers or already currently lieutenants, right? And they're all going to be in the same mindset. They're going to understand things you're going to talk about. They're going to be able to sit there and listen to an hour brief and retain hopefully at least 50% of it, right? But when I got to my platoon, for example, I had guys who, one of my drivers, one of my loaders, they're sitting there. I go to do an op-word brief. If the op-word brief was more than 20 minutes, like we'd start having people, zoning out and that's typical. Like when you're in the field, it's gonna be typical. So that was like a wake up call to me. I was like, oh man, like this is totally different than ROTC, totally different than BOLC. Like I got to do things that make sense. So common sense became a huge thing where I feel like sometimes in like the TRADOC world or in, cadet land, I'll call it, you kind of have this veil over your eyes is what I'll call it, where you think that everything is going to be like, oh, this is how it's going to be always. This is how it's going to be perfect. Like I have my perfect model in front of me, right? But then you're going to get to your unit And the veil is almost like lifted off your face at that point. You're like, oh wow, like I have to adapt to whatever I've got going on, right? So you might have situations that are going to be you have a lot shorter time cut, or you might have a different variety of people that you have to put it in a way that they'll understand it, not something that you know everybody in BOLC would have understood. So it is a wake up call for sure. You learn a lot. It does give you a basic foundation, but there's gonna definitely be some spots where you're gonna have to do some remodeling and work on the foundation a little bit once you get to your unit, and that's gonna happen with any unit. Once I switch from I'm with 212 Cav currently with First Cavalry Division over at Fort Cavazos. But once I go to my new unit, like things will be totally different there. So anybody that has like PCS or moved around with the military is going to know that obviously you're going to have to tweak some things depending on what group you're with, what unit you're with, whatever they do, how they run. So that was the thing I think that ROTC and BOLC did not prepare me for was just being ready to like change things up all the time. Like there's gonna be times where you've never known you do not know what the heck you're doing. You're just gonna have to take the basics that you learned from RTC, BOLC, and then you're just gonna have to apply them in a different light. And I think that's one of the coolest things is having to have the adaptability to be able to do that. So
Yeah, no, those are great points. I'm glad you brought those up because it is like a catch-22 because in BOLC or in ROTC, everyone is of the same mind. So you're in a space with your peers and we all want the same thing. We all are engaged in those op order briefs because that could be us next week. That's in that leadership position or in the next hour being blue carded. So we're like all engaged, all involved. But you're right. When you get to your unit, one of the guys in the back, he just wants to know, all right, when do I get to eat?
yeah,
Like, when do I get to eat? Where do I need to be? Let me know. So you do have to like kind of adjust fire and speak to people where they are.
another thing too, though, like the tactical side for armor specifically, it's tough when it comes to like does armor bullet prepare you because what's going to happen and this is just like the truth of it when it comes to armor there's still staff involved, right? So like you might get to your unit, you might immediately get put in S3 operations, right? And you might be working upwards and planning and all that kind of stuff, right? So like when I first got to Fort Cavazos, I thought immediately, cool, I'm going to be on a tank. I just came from Benning at the time. We're perfect. Something to think about though is that if you do go to all those courses you can go to at Benning, right? They have airborne, there's ranger, there's other ones like you can go through scout leader course. There's also RSLIC. Some people get chances to go to that one. Depending on how long you're there, I was there for almost 12 months, right? So from when I went to BOLC in the first 4 months, I had 8 months in between there and then getting to Fort Cavazos and then meeting my unit and all. And then immediately I got put into the 3 shop for 4 months time. So I was away from tank organic stuff for probably close to a year at that point, right? So when it comes to the tactical side, you'll remember things, but again, it's muscle memory. So if you don't do it every day, you're gonna start forgetting stuff, right? So when I first showed up to my platoon, it was like I didn't know anything, and I had to just be like, all right, teach me everything. So, my gunner, he would sit me down and we'd talk about stuff or he'd teach me things. And you really just have to be humble about it. Pretend like it's something you've never seen before and just go into it and just like be a sponge and soak up everything that everybody tells you. Um, once you get, I would say once you get to like a 4 to 6 month period of being in the platoon, like you'll have a good gauge on things. You'll feel really comfortable doing what you do and you'll know, like it'll become your craft. You will know it very well. Until you get switched out of the platoon. And then like for me, I recently got switched out. So I got switched out in July. I'm currently the battalion maintenance officer. And being out of it for a little bit, there's definitely things that like I forget, right? There's other things, 100% I remember, but there's other things that like obviously since I don't do it every day, I'm gonna start losing that. So that's just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, so you're kind of hitting on some of it, but what does a typical day look like? And I know that's challenging because
Yeah.
you've been in so many positions. So if you wanted to pick one or two or a few and kind of just talk
Yeah.
about what a typical day looks like for a platoon leader, but the floor is yours. Go for it.
Yeah, I can highlight a few pretty quick. So I'll go over just the three jobs I've had real quick. So when I first got to 212, I got put in operations. Um, Typically, they're going to have a bunch of like my battalion is pretty specific. We have a lot of lieutenants right now. We have like close to 30, I would say close to 30 lieutenants in the battalion, right? Which is a lot. And so for us specifically, they had to switch lieutenants out pretty rapidly when it comes to platoon time. So whereas most PLs will get anywhere from 9 to, I would say close to 15 months of PL time. There's some of us that like I got cut short at 9. Some of my friends now are PLs and they're getting cut short at 5 months. So it's like you're not always going to have as much time as you think you will when it comes to platoon. Some people I know have 15. It all depends on your unit. All depends on how many officers, right? So anyway, for me, I got put in the three shop right away. Daily life, right? You'll do PT, morning formation. That's kind of like for all three of these jobs I'll go over, it's the same. You'll go to PT in the morning, right? Um, go to PT in the morning, go home or go shower, go wherever you're going, whether it be the gym, whether it be the DFAC, wherever. You'll typically, work out from anywhere from 06 to 7:30, and then from 7:30 to 9, you'll go do whatever you gotta do, food, shower, whatever. Then coming in, working operations and stuff like that. You'll come in the office. They'll typically have like people for future operations. They'll have some people for current operations, and then you'll plan debating on like whatever's going on, right? So whether you're doing a giant field training exercise or whether you're doing some sort of, for example, I got put in charge at first of we had like a partner school we worked with. We'd like go hang out with the kids and stuff like that. That was something I had to plan, right? Something you wouldn't expect the army necessarily to be doing. Cool, great opportunity, right? So anyway, that's all planning. You'll go to meetings. You'll do a lot of the like analysis of how missions will go and stuff like that. That's like S3, that's some of staff, right? You're doing a lot of behind the desk on the computer. You'll use Microsoft Word and PowerPoint a lot, making con ops for all different kinds of stuff. When you move into platoon, right, it'll be a very similar thing. You have a little bit more, you can be a little bit more, what's the word I would call it? It's like you can change things up a little bit more when you're a PL, right? So you're at a smaller echelon, you're not at battalion level, you're at company and platoon level. So depending on how cool your company commander is or how lenient they are, if you come up with a really good plan, you can implement things that are not necessarily the same as everybody else, right? For example, we would do certain things during the week for PT instead of the normal that everybody else in the company would do. So again, PT in the morning, 7:30 to 9, you have whatever. Mondays, you'll go down to the motor pool and we'll typically work through any maintenance we got to do on the tanks. That was a pretty good time. I love that. Always be in the motor pool. Like if you're an armor officer, always be with your guys. Your guys are, I would argue, the opinion of your guys is going to be more important than the opinion of anybody else. Because the soldiers you're going to be working with are going to either be the ones that help the platoon succeed or help the platoon fail. Yes, it is on you at the end of the day, but it's their platoon, right? You're just there for a short period of time. So yeah, definitely like fighting for them and being around them and showing them that you're involved. Because if you're involved, they're gonna want to be involved too, right? So that's a Monday, right? You'll go down and do maintenance. But a normal week, right? You'll be either planning training or you'll do sometimes the NCOs will take over and they'll teach a class. Like I would advise like sitting in on those so you can learn too. There's going to be other things too that you're going to have to do as like the officer, right? You're going to have to do some of the admin side, figure out who's been going to appointments, who hasn't been. You'll work with your platoon sergeant on that kind of stuff. But one of the really cool things is you'll get to plan and do things like that. So we had some equipment that we were assigned that like nobody had ever had any hands on. So it was really cool to assign my gunner at the time, like, hey, I want you and one other guy to come up with a class on this, and I want you to teach everybody. So it was a really cool opportunity to like empower others, especially guys who are. A lot of people look at senior non-commissioned officers, staff sergeant and sergeant level, and they'll expect a lot from them, right? But they don't expect a lot from their corporals or from their specialists or from their PFCs, right? So or even their privates if they have any, right? And so it was really, really cool as a PL to like empower people who were, PFC and below or specialists and below to teach classes that, I had staff sergeants teaching. So it was really cool. But that's like a day to day. You'll do PT, right? You'll do some maintenance. You'll go do training. There's going to be other days where you have to do details like random taskings that you or your guys will have to go complete. But That's kind of, you're going to have that anywhere. Any big, division that you're with, and First Cavalry Division is huge. So we get tasked with a fair amount of stuff. And then maintenance. So when it comes to being a battalion maintenance officer, right? Armor is pretty interesting on how you can be a jack of all trades. Essentially, you could be a scout platoon leader, you could be a tank platoon leader, you can be on staff, you can be a battalion maintenance officer, you can be so many different things. And so for maintenance, for me, right, I work with a warrant officer and I work with a senior NCO, right? And we run our shop office. We pretty much run everything when it comes to parts, parts coming from the SSA. Essentially, companies and platoons will have issues with their vehicles, right? They'll identify, okay, cool, this thing's broken or this thing is a deadline. They'll put it on the print, the ESR, right? We'll talk about that, figure out where we can get parts from, and then we'll do inflow of parts. And then my job as the battalion maintenance officer is essentially to be the liaison between the battalion and the maintenance team, just to let them know this is what's going on. This is how we're applying pressure in this one area, or this is how we're getting parts for this vehicle, and essentially just understanding the whole like big picture of what's going on with maintenance. My day for that, again, PT, all that kind of stuff, it's a little bit different because I'm here in Poland right now. So, my team will go back. We'll have early mornings, late nights sometimes when parts arrive. We'll process all the parts. Chief, me, and one of the NCOs I work with will, work through how to present most of this stuff to the battalion so the battalion commander can make decisions off of it. It's a pretty cool job. Different than what I expected when I first got it, but that's essentially like the life of it through each one of those little jobs, right? It's gonna be like a roll of the dice every day. There's gonna be random things that come out of nowhere and kind of hit you sideways, and you're gonna be like, man, I have no clue this is happening, and you're gonna have to adapt to it. There's gonna be other days where you have a little bit of continuity, and you kind of know what to expect, um, or what's going on. So
One thing that you said, the opinion of your guys. I'm probably botching what you said. The opinion of your guys, it matters a lot. Probably
yeah,
more than most. And that's so key and so vitally important because, like you said, this is a small window of leadership that we have, 9 months PL time, and you work pretty much all of your enlisted time, all of your ROTC time, BOLC time preparing
yeah,
for those 9 months. And then
exactly.
somebody else is in the seat. So that's one that you don't want to get wrong. You have that influence where you can affect change at your level, and influence um, soldiers. And you have to be people centric. You have to be we centric
Yep,
because you never know who you're inspiring. I'm pretty sure you inspire so many in your platoon to, I don't know, be the next you. Switch over, become an officer, or become a NCO, or be a lifer in the military. You probably
yep,
shifted their entire perspective. It's ever evolving too. I'm pretty sure you've had to adjust fire based on like personality. Everyone doesn't
yep.
receive things the same. So you almost have to be like a manager of personalities as well. And
You're,
you have to be you have to be like grounded and centered yourself. So what kind of advice would you give someone, soldiers, cadets, aspiring army officers? What kind of advice would you give anyone that's considering the armor branch?
Yeah, so considering the armor branch, definitely, like, again, I'm gonna go back to physical fitness. Like, be physically fit. It is a job that, sure, you might not be walking around doing as much as the infantry guys are, but you still need to be physically fit. There's gonna be a lot of things that you're gonna have to do. I mean, you're working with tanks, you're working with Bradleys. A lot of them got heavy parts or heavy equipment, right? So like, you got to be physically fit, or else you're gonna have some issues. Um, I would work on that, right? I would work on just like ask around, like people in the armor community, or people that are officers, or people that are in the army in general. Like, ask them questions, pick their brain on certain things. That's something that I tried doing a lot before I became an armor officer. Is like, hey, if I run into this, how do I approach it, or how would you approach it, right? And that helped give me some advice, right? I ran into my own issues as a PL. I ran into my own issues like as an armor officer. You're gonna learn from them. That's like a huge thing. There's nothing you can do to prepare yourself for those mistakes because you will make them and you will learn from them. And that is all you can do with certain things, right? Because it's all based off of the personnel you have in your unit. It all is based off of the situations you're going on, the training you're going on. Like you're going to get put through different situations compared to other people. But something you can definitely do is ask people their opinion on certain things, like think in your head about, oh, what would happen if this happened, or what would I approach with this situation, right? And that makes it a little easier to just think about in your head. Like you start thinking, the gears start winding, and you can see what other people have done, and it helps give you a little bit of an like little bit of experience to understand maybe what you would want to do, right? That's one thing you can do. Um, I would definitely there's tons of like YouTube is a huge asset when it comes to armor, when it comes to anything that is in the army. YouTube is great because you can see like because not only your YouTube channel, right, but there's so many other people that also have stuff. You have armor officers that have stuff, you have the armor branch post stuff. If you want to get absolutely fired up, just go look up anything that has to do with the freaking tanks that we use, right? The M1 Abrams is a mean fighting machine, right? So just look up anything, right? The Sullivan Cup is a great thing to look up if you really want to get fired up for armor, right? That's always going on at Fort Benning. It's great. They put out a lot of other things, right? Just get into some of the information, right? I wouldn't stress yourself like trying to read through all these manuals and different things and learning about the tank now because like things could change, right? By the time that you even get in, right? When I first got here, like our tanks were like it was just before I got to my unit, our tanks had switched out, right? So at BOLC I was on the V2. When I got to Fort Cavazos was on the V3. So like things are gonna change. So don't stress yourself out with that stuff. Like I would say generally build yourself as a leader, right? So whether that be reading books, whether that be listening to podcasts or getting to know people or asking people about stuff in the army, right? Or even just like looking around on YouTube or Google, right? Those are so many different things you can do to like prep yourself to be a better leader and to understand different things. When it comes to preparing yourself for being an armor officer or going into the armor community, those are the things that I would say.
I can tell that mentorship is a huge component to your leadership, your philosophy, and just the way that you carry yourself. You can tell when someone has people in their corner. One of my mentors, he like you brought up books. He recommended this book, Legacy. You might have read it by James
I've heard
Kerr.
of it.
And yeah, it's a really good book. Some of the things that you've been saying throughout this podcast has just been like just jogging my memory on a lot of the contents in that book, especially when you're talking about being with your guys and
Yeah,
having that influence. One of the things in the book talked about leaving it's a rugby book, right? And one of the
yeah,
focal points was to leave the jersey in a better place. And I don't know why, but I mean, we put the uniform on every single day. And every time I put that uniform on and I see the US Army name tape, I'm like, how can I leave the Army in a better place? How can I leave my little section in a better place when it's all said and done? Because no matter if you do 30 years, it's still a small pocket in the big picture, in the grand scheme. So how can you maximize whatever time you're given as an army leader to leave it in a better place?
yeah. So speaking of that, I'm gonna give you a quote that my first sergeant when I was still in the company gave me. I had three guys get in trouble at one point, and we were going through something, and we had to deal with it, right? And this will start off this. It'll get this ball rolling. So my first sergeant said he said that you have two names on your chest, and you have the ability to either make them look great or you have the ability to crush them and put them in the dirt, right? And so it's like you have your name, obviously. So the things you do are going to affect your name, right? But they're also going to affect the U.S. Army at the end of the day, right? So anything that you do or fail to do is going to be a reflection of both names on your chest, right? And so that's something that's super interesting. And yeah, I would just say when you're in a position, like give everything your 100%. There's going to be days where you're going to be like, man, I'm fed up with this. I don't want to do this or whatever. But something else that someone had told me at one time, because again, I'm gonna give a lot of credit to my wife right now because she honestly works in the background in my life a lot, right? And she's the one that is just motivating me throughout all of it. So there will be days I come home and I'm like, man, I'm so tired of this. I want to get out of the army. I'm done, right? And she will, you know, kind of help me de-stress or like let it go. And that's gonna happen in any job you do. That's something that I tell a lot of people is that everybody thinks the grass is greener on the other side once they get out of the army or out of the military. But you're always going to have brown spots in your grass, right? No matter what, your grass isn't going to be the perfect spot of grass on the block, even if you switch houses, right? So I always tell people you're going to have ups and downs in any job you go to. You can get out of the army and go to another job. You're still going to have things you're not going to enjoy or some things you're not going to like. But at the end of the day, in that moment, when you're upset about whatever you're working through or whatever's going on, by the time by the time you get to the point where you can even make a decision on it and change whatever's going on, you're already going to be out of that storm, we'll call it, that you were in, right? So you're going to be past it by the time that you can even make an effective change. So something that I would say for sure is like when you get put in positions, like give it your all and remember of like who you are doing it for. So like not only are you doing it for yourself, right? But because if you're going to do anything, you should do it 100%. There's no point in doing something if you're not going to give it your all when you go to do it, right? That's like if I was going to sweep my floor in my room right now, and instead of sweeping the second half of the room, what's the point in sweeping the first half? That makes no sense. It's just a waste of time. So it's the same thing when it comes to, if you get put in a job or you get told to do a certain tasking or you get put in a position you didn't expect, like give it your all. Because at the end of the day, again, you're doing it for yourself. So if you're going to do anything, might as well give it your best effort. Two, there's going to be someone that's going to come in behind you at some point and do your job once you're done with it, and you're either going to hurt them or you're going to help them. And what we like most of us should want to help the person that's coming in because I know for a fact, like any job that I've had, whether it was the platoon, whether it was in staff, whether it was as the battalion maintenance officer, there have always been things where I'm like, man, I wish the person like ahead of me had done this, and this. It would have helped me out, right? And I'm now like when we get back to the U.S., I'm going to be switching out. So like recently, I've been thinking, how can I do things to set up to queue up the next guy or the next girl who takes my position, right? And so yeah, I would just say like the number one thing is like giving your best effort in everything. And there's going to be days where you're not going to get your 100%. You're going to be lacking, right? And that's going to happen. But you shouldn't sit there and be like, man, this is stupid. I'm not going to do this at all. Or I hate this thing. I don't want to put effort into it. Like if you get assigned something, like put your best effort in, right? Again, because you got two names on your chest. So
Cam, this is some good stuff, and you're a very smart man because you shouted out your wife.
you have okay. So that's
You
one thing
have
I'm going to highlight. I'm going to highlight right now. All right. I don't know what is wrong with all the military leaders I have seen up to this point, but almost every single one, when they go to a ceremony of any kind, and I've made a promise to myself now, whenever I get promoted, whenever if I ever take command or do any of that kind of stuff, the first person, I'm not going to do the whole spiel of, oh, thank you so and so for being here, and thank you so and so for being here, because I'm sure you've seen it in a lot of ceremonies. It's always like, oh, thank you, Colonel so and so and so and so, right? And they go down the line, and then they either one forget about their spouse, or two they're the last one that they shout out. And so from the amount of ceremonies I've been at where that's happened, I always am like my number one supporter, my wife. She's the number one person I will shout out every time. So that's just something that is something I will put out there because I've seen it so many times and it just makes me sad to see how many people either forget about their spouse or put them last.
I mean, but I think that's the mark of success. How? All right. So you said your soldiers, their opinion matters most, but
Yeah.
of course, your wife, your family's
Yeah.
opinion really matters because at the end of the day, that's who
Absolutely.
you have. Um, my hero is my father, and he did 28 years
Mm-hmm.
in the army, and out of all the accolades and achievements that he amassed throughout his 28 years, I think the best picture of success that I saw was at his retirement ceremony. His entire family was on the front row
Oh
with him at the end together. He and my
yeah. Mm-hmm.
mom married for 30 plus years.
Yep.
God rest her soul. But like that is the mark of success because there are a lot of leaders that make it to the end and accomplish great things. And I mean, their resume is decked out, but they lost their families in the
Yep.
process. And I'm pretty sure
Mhm.
there's other factors that played into that.
Yeah, for
But I
sure.
think the true mark of success is like, all right, I want to be great in what I'm doing and what I'm investing my time in, but I don't want to lose my family in the midst of all of that. I want them to be at the end with me. So very smart.
Something that,
Shouting
yeah,
out Lori.
absolutely. Something I'll highlight real quick, just because you mentioned it, right? Is a lot of people get to the finish line and they'll have lost so much from where they began, right? And there's going to be outside factors that are going to affect that. But at the end of the day, something that I have to ask myself sometimes when I've been at work, there's gonna be late nights sometimes, right? There's gonna be other times where you have to like take a pause in your head and be like, is this something that is a must do today, or is this a something that can also get completed tomorrow, right? Because there's a lot of times I feel like people will sit there and it's like, oh, I have extra time, I'll just get it done now. It'll be 5 o'clock in the afternoon, or 5 o'clock p.m. right, or 6 p.m. whatever, and people will still be at work doing something that can easily get completed the next day. And I'm not saying that to like push people off to not, work to the best effort that they can. For example, I'm on rotation right now, right? So every day I'm working past 5 o'clock. That's fine. I don't have a family to go home to right now. Like I don't have anywhere to go, right? I'm here. But back at home, there were a few times like as a PL, or there were a few times when I was with staff that I had to ask the question of like, all right, cool. Did I get everything that needed to be completed today? Like the expectations of my boss, were they completed today? Yes, they were. Okay, cool. So it's like, is this something that I can do tomorrow, or is this something that is a must do today? And you're gonna have some that are a must do today, right? But like, yeah, your family is gonna be huge, is crucial. At the end of the day, this is the thing I'll say. At the end of the day, when you get out of the army, you're not gonna have the army anymore. You will have the family that you have built, though. Hopefully, at that point. So, I feel like so many people put their identity. It all comes down to where you put your identity, right? And there's a lot of people who put their identity in the military, and that's why I see so many people have a struggle when they get out. They're looking for a sense of purpose, and so it's like, what gives you your purpose, and what gives you, um, you know, what are you doing it all for, at the end of the day? And if you're doing it all for your family, but you lose your family in the process because you haven't been focusing on them, then what was the whole point? So again, there's exterior circumstances that affect certain people, right? But there are a lot of people I've seen that have thrown their family to the wayside to focus so much on work that at the end of the day they're going to get out of the army, and the army won't be for them. The army won't be there for them anymore. So it's just something I would say, like, for sure, remember who you're doing it for, and like who's supporting you at the end of the day.
We're off script here, but I think this is a very important
Yeah.
moment that I don't share enough on this channel. How is that work-life integration? Because there's no such thing as balance, but how do you integrate your family to the point where, hey, we're doing this together? I don't know, maybe it's let's choose our next assignment together, or you're meal to meal, so y'all are going to have a lot of these conversations like, what's next, what are we doing, how can we rejigger this thing so that each of us gets a fair shake out of it.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually something perfect I can talk about, since my wife and I are literally in the process of doing this right now. Um, so yeah, when it comes to that, it like my wife and I are dual military, right? She's an army nurse, so it makes it a little easier to understand where we're both coming from. But something that I have noticed is like there's been certain opportunities, like for example, armor. I'll just be honest, armor is super packed full of people right now for my year group, and so they recently came out with a ton of jobas. They were like 90 some odd jobas, which are essentially like a job you can go be an XO over at one of the TRADOC basic training units. You can go work for recruiting. It's just like other ways to get out and do other assignments, right? They had 98 or something like that that were specifically for armor, right, to get people out. And there were some people that just like automatically were like, "Yep, I'll do it." And most of those people were single, right? So it's easy; they can just make a decision and go. But for me, I sat there and I had to like think. The first thing that popped in my head was, oh my gosh, like if I get picked for this, I have to figure out what's going on with my wife Lori and where we'll be and everything like that, right? So luckily I didn't get picked for it. I was fine. But recently I've had an opportunity to switch jobs out of armor, which is something I'm interested in. This is probably going to answer one of your questions for later, but it's interesting opportunity to go into a functional area. So that's what I'm looking into right now. But again, I had to have a really deep conversation with my wife about, there was a lot that went into it. It wasn't just a conversation, right? I emailed branch managers asking for information, duty assignments, duty locations, how the um, career progression is. But then at the same time, she's trying to go into the labor and delivery course for nursing in the Army, and that's at a different location. So we're trying to figure out and see, oh, where would she have to go? Where would I have to go? Where would we want to go after, right? And so it's something that we discussed, and then like one thing that her and I both came to the conclusion of was like we will not allow ourselves to be stationed somewhere separate from each other. Like even if I have to give something up career wise, I will give it up so that I can be with her. And so that's something that we have both discussed, and like made very clear to each other. But at the same time, it's just a matter of like working. Like people will work with you in the Army if you know, work yourself. You have to like also work on things too. So like whenever it came to doing stuff like that, or talking to career managers or talking about duty assignments, like I just would tell them and voice opinion. Like you have to tell them obviously your biggest concerns. It's the same thing as when you move into a house, right? So it's like, all right, what do you want in a house? Oh, I want 3 bedrooms, I want 2 baths, I want a garage, I want a patio, whatever, right? So like the minute that someone's like, oh, what do you want for a duty assignment? Like if you could pick, I'm like anywhere my wife can go, that's number one, right? Then number two is like, okay, maybe we want to be closer to family, or maybe we want to go visit some location we've always wanted to go to, right? My wife is partial to Colorado. She's like always wanted to go to Carson, right? Um, I wouldn't mind getting back on the East Coast at some point, but it all comes down to like what you want, and there's compromise, obviously. But yeah, I mean, it's just there's a lot of communication that is needed. I would say the number one thing that is like crucial in any relationship you have is communication, because most of the other things you have are gonna be reliant on that communication, right? Your finances are gonna be reliant on communication. Um, your family's gonna be reliant on communication. Like all the things that revolve around your family and the people that support you is gonna be your communication with them, right? And so I think that that's a huge, crucial factor when it comes to the military and understanding what's going on. So definitely like compromises are going to need to be made, is what I'll say. But it all comes down to like what's the make or break? And my make or break is being stationed with her or not. And so, obviously I'm going to change things based on what I need to do that.
This kind of feeds right into this question. If you can go back and do it over again, would you change anything? Would you choose a different branch, or do you like where you are?
So there's like a two-parter for me. If I could go back and change it all, I would consider doing a branch detail, only because, and like this will be totally honest, right? At some point, you're going to end up in staff if you go armor. Totally fine. It's going to happen. There's a lot of other jobs you go immediately into staff and you're in staff your whole career. But with armor specifically, right? Everybody looks forward to the PL time. They don't really look past that. They're like, oh, I'm going to be a PL forever. And then you get taken out of your platoon and then things, change. You'll go on staff, you'll go be a company commander eventually, maybe. And then from there, you'll go back to staff. Like, if you're going to do 20 years as an armor officer, you're going to probably be on staff for probably 14 of those years, where you'll have like 6 years in command. You'll have, or like in charge, right? You'll have PL time, you'll have commander time, and then you'll be a battalion commander, maybe higher if you get there, right? If I could go back, I would probably do a branch detail, right? That would allow you to be in armor for your first like 4-ish years. And then when you go to captain's career course, you'll switch jobs over, right? That's something that I've considered doing here soon. Recently, I had a MILPER message come out, so some things changed for me. I would not change armor though. Like going back and picking armor was probably the best choice I could have made. I met so many great people. I met, yeah, like some of my best friends to this day were made by going armor. I love doing the combat arms kind of stuff. I love working with the tanks. It was amazing, super super fun, right? I will not change that for the world, right? But when it comes to like where I will go from here, I will probably be switching over, right? So I'm looking into functional area 46. It's public affairs officer. So currently what I'm looking into, granted, again, there was a MILPER message that like got pushed out, and so I'm just trying to take advantage of the MILPER message. So it was like a opportunity that came up. We'll see how it plays out. But yeah, if I could go back and do it all again, I probably would have done a branch detail. I would have kept armor as the branch detail, and then I would have tried probably switched to MI. So, but other than that, like it all comes down to what you want. I've got some guys here that I know that are lieutenants, right, that were branch detailed and they were armor, but they were branch detailed, but they want to stay armor, so they don't want to go to their like next branch. They want to stay with armor, so they want to get rid of their branch detail. And that was something that came from my mentor. So my mentor Hunter at the time, he told me, he's like, "Hey man, if I were you, I would do straight branch, like branch straight. Don't branch with a detail because it sometimes it can be easier to get out of like to switch branches if you're straight than it will be for you to switch if you're already a branch detail." So that was the reason I took that advice. That's why I went straight armor, didn't do anything. It allowed me to have like other branches out to do other things, right? Whereas the people who do, you know, MI branch detail armor, it's very difficult for them to get out of that now that they've already signed saying that they're going to do that. Whereas, like for example, armor, like I said, my year group is stacked with people, so they need people to like do other jobs, and so it's allowed for an opportunity for me to like do that if I want to. So it really, you can battle back and forth all you want about like, oh, what should you do? Again, it's something you really have to just sit there and do as much research on the branches and talk to as many people as you can. Watch the videos that you have, for example, um, to get a good understanding of like what you want to do. Because at the end of the day, you can change things, right? That can happen. There's going to be a point in your life where you won't be able to change things, but like when you're a lieutenant and when you're a captain, you're pretty moldable, right? So it's like, let's say you were to pick a branch and you're like, oh man, I don't really like this, or it's not what I expected. Like you can V-tip into different jobs. You can, um, I've seen people switch branches. Like there's a lot of opportunities still to switch, even when you're, a lieutenant or a captain. It all comes down to what you want to do. Like I said, people are switching. Some people I know had certain expectations, didn't like it. I had guys that went through BOLC, immediately got to their unit, and they're like, I don't want to be an armor officer, right? Which is really weird. But then you have other people who hated it in the beginning when they went to BOLC, and now they love it. And then you have other people like me, right, who like certain parts of it, but see other things that they want to, further their path in, and that's kind of what I'm trying to do. So
Nice. I appreciate you being candid, open, and
yeah,
honest. And this was really why I started this branch series, because everybody has a journey, everybody has a story, and I mean, I think that your voice needs to be heard, just like many others. Because I know when I was enlisted, right off the bat, like not even after the conclusion of basic training, I knew that I chose the wrong MOS, being a 25 series. Just
yep.
knowing what I'm good at, my talents, and just like, taking that introspection time, I was like, hey, I made a mistake, and now I'm switched over and I'm an AG officer. And it was like, this is exactly where I wish I would have landed at the beginning. But sometimes it takes you the journey to come to that, and the experiences, the people that you meet along the way, it's really invaluable. So Cam, you're the best. Leaders, I hope that this conversation has added value to you the way that it has added value to me. I mean, I've been leaned in this entire time, just soaking up every word that Cam has been speaking, because it's just been spot on and just really speaking to me. So we talked professionally, personally, family, and subscribe if you want more content like this. Cam, the floor is yours. Any parting
No,
words? I'll give you the last word. Final words that you want to share, advice, lessons learned, or just overall encouragement.
hey, listen, the one thing I will say is that great things come from small beginnings. That's one thing for sure. So even though you think something is small, doesn't mean that it can't be great and amazing one day. So, you know, take every chance you can to better yourself. Take every chance you can to learn something. I really appreciate you for letting me come on, right, and just ramble my thoughts and just talk and let loose on a lot of different things. And then definitely like remember like who your anchor is and remember who your support system is because those are crucial when it comes to the army and when it comes to making decisions like this kind of stuff. So a lot of people are gonna have a lot of opinions. Their opinions don't matter. It really like the people who matter most are the people you're working with every day and the people that are gonna be behind you every day. So
Thank you so much for tuning in. Cam, thank you so much for coming on. You're welcome anytime. Anytime you want to come
Yeah,
on,
no,
just hit me up. Just hit me up and say, hey, let's get on here and let's talk about some things. I need to get some words out. And you can always use this platform. You've always been an inspiration to me and somebody that I could go to, talk to, confide in, and never change. You've been the same since I met you. And I appreciate, the Bible studies and all the stuff that we were able to do during our time at LU. Again, thanks for coming on. Thanks for encouraging the audience. If you all have any questions, just send them my way. Follow me at the _Hill. If you have questions for Cam, just send them my way. I'll send them to him, and I'm pretty sure he won't have any issues fielding those questions. That said, leaders, keep leading, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace, Cam.
See ya. Thanks.